The opposite of addiction is community and relationship. And when we are involved in community and relationship, our brain releases chemicals that make us feel good. And one of those big chemicals is dopamine. And that's what we're going to talk about right now. So there's two areas of your brain I want to focus on. One is right here where my cursor is, only deep within that part of our brain. That's going to be our limbic system. It's our reward system. It's where we feel pleasure, any kind of pleasure, watching our kids play sports or be in the school play, spending time with a loved one, exercise, eating chocolate cake, for me, eating Krispy Kreme donuts, right? That's our pleasure center. Any pleasure that we have, it is a limbic system function, okay? And instead of all the terrible structures in it, because it has structures in it like corpus callosum and amygdala and globus pallidus and putamen. Those are terrible words. I don't understand any of them, but I get go. So we're going to call it go, okay? And then everything in front of this fissure right here is the frontal lobe of our brain, which has a lot of functions, but we're going to focus on three: insight, judgment, and empathy. And we're going to call it stop. So what I want to talk to you over the next few minutes is this interaction between go and stop, because it's a yin and a yang, okay? So the go system of our brain, the limbic system, has two big functions. One is it's responsible for our desire and our will to live. And two, it's responsible for our species going forward in time. So you think about it right now, wherever you are, what would you do to save your own life right now? What would you do to prevent from dying? I'll tell you, you'll do anything. Okay. You will do anything to survive, because survival is an instinct within us that is controlled by the limbic system. What happens in addiction is that drive for life, that's a limbic system function, that's a go system function, is replaced by whatever the addiction is. Okay. So in the throes of my addiction, I would sit down with you and I would tell you the most important things in my life or my family, my wife, my kids, right? Those are the most important things in my life. And it's not true. The most important thing in my life was OxyContin, because if I didn't have OxyContin, I couldn't survive. And if I can't survive, I can't take care of my family. So the most important thing is that drug. And that's what happens in addiction, is the limbic system natural function gets hijacked by something outside, in my case, OxyContin. And so in order for me to be okay, I've got to have this. And if I don't have this, I'm not okay. And if I'm not okay, then none of this other stuff can exist. And I will do anything to get that. I will come into your house, in your medicine cabinet, and I will take it out while I'm using the bathroom at your house. I will steal from you. I will do things that you would think I'm not capable of doing. Look at me. And I promise you guys, I've done them. And I'm not a sociopath, because I thought I would die without it. Now, here's what I want to tell you about cravings. Cravings are why people relapse. They don't relapse because they get dope sick. They relapse because of cravings. Somebody who's addicted, their craving for that drug is 10 times stronger than your cravings are for food when you're hungry and water when you're thirsty. So I want you just think about that every single time that you're up against this, and tell somebody just to put something down. I'm not saying that they can't, but I'm going to tell you it's going to be a real, real long shot. So I used to get up every morning, and I was in withdrawals from the night before because I hadn't had any drugs. And I would walk to my bathroom. I was in my early 30s. I felt like I was in my 80s, and my bones were hurting so bad. I was sweating. And I had two pictures there of my kids that Karen had made for me. They were a picture of Heath, who was, 6 years old at the time, in my work clothes, the things I wear to work, khaki pants, a white shirt. And, of course, they're just draped off of him. And then she had Haley's picture made in the wedding dress that she wore when she married me. So those are my two favorite pictures. And I would used to lay those pictures out on my counter there by my sink and look down at them and cry, because I wanted to quit so bad. I didn't want to do this. I hear people say, oh, you got to find your bottom. You got to want it. Bullshit. I wanted it. I wanted it more than anything. I could not do it. I got sick, or I would get through being sick, and the cravings were so bad I couldn't do anything else. And not even my kids that could stop me. It's funny because I still have that house in Johnson City, and when I go home, I still see those pictures. They're still right beside my sink, and I look at them and I can see the little water stains on them from my tears back then, because that was an everyday thing. And then I had somebody tell me, "Oh, you just didn't want it bad enough." They got no idea. They don't have any idea of the darkness of that place. And I don't get mad anymore, but I do want them to understand that. Because we have people like that in our lives right now that we say, well, you just can't get this because you don't want it bad enough, or you hadn't suffered enough. And guys, for the most part, that's just not true at all. So that's one system, one function of the reward system. The other function, it's responsible for our species going forward in time. So what does our species have to do to go forward in time? Number one, we got to live to be reproductive age. Number two, we got to have sex. And all the things around that had better feel good or we won't do them. So how do we live to be reproductive age? We eat food. Does eating food make you feel good? You're daggone right it does. So you guys are on Eastern time, so it's now 10 after 12 where you are. And if you haven't eaten lunch yet, you're getting hungry. Right? Your blood sugar may have dropped a little bit. If you skipped breakfast and just had a cup of coffee or something else, more than likely you're real hungry. You got all these cues around you that it's time to eat. Number one is the clock, right? Noontime. Number two could be one of your coworkers went out and got something and you can smell it, right? And all those things are stimulating your cravings. You feel a little bit bad because you hadn't eaten. Your brain has euphoric recall because it remembers how good you felt the last time you ate and you had these feelings that food made it go away. So you know how to make it go away. So you grab something. Right? You're having cravings, you grab something, you take a few bites. What happens in your brain after you take a few bites? Your body makes its own fentanyl, it makes its own heroin, it makes its own morphine. They're called endorphins and enkephalins. Those endorphins and enkephalins attach to the opioid receptors in the reward system of your brain. Same receptors that heroin attaches to, same receptors that fentanyl attaches to, and it leads to the downstream release of something called dopamine. And everybody in that room y'all are in right now, wherever you are, you love dopamine. It's what makes you fat, happy, and satisfied. It's why after you have a big meal, you got to lean back and undo your pants a little bit, and you can barely hold your head up. You're so relaxed and under in a dopamine haze that you just want to take a nap, right? And the reason for that is God made us to do these things, right? And if we're going to keep doing them, they had better feel good. If God had designed a brain that every time you ate food, you threw your toenails up and got sicker than heck, right? You'd stop doing that. You wouldn't live to be reproductive age. Our species would not go forward in time, right? So God knew what he was doing, right? Does sex feel good? Yes. Sex didn't feel good. Nobody do it, right? If you got sick again, every time you had sex, people would stop. Our species would die. So everybody agrees food, water, and sex are good things, right? That is a go system function. Food, water, sex, reproduction. It does some other things, but for our purposes, we're going to leave it at that. Now, can you think of an instance where food, water, sex may not be a good thing? And don't worry, I'm not going to tread down a sex route. Okay, we're going to talk about food. Any of you ever tried to lose weight? All right, how did that go? Really tough. So up until about 5 years ago, I weighed a little over 250. I did everything in the world I could to lose weight. I ate all carbs, no carbs, all fat, no fats. I was a vegetarian one time for about 35 minutes. I stuck pregnancy hormone into my belly for a month, lost 40 pounds. I always gained it all back. So 5 years ago, I came up with this. And I want you all to keep in mind, I am a trained physician. I decided I'm going to watch what I eat and exercise. And I'm going to do it every day. And I have. I've done it every day. I did it this morning. I go to a gym here where I live in Mount Juliet, 6:15, work out for an hour in a coach-led class. It's called Orange Theory. And walk out after an hour. This morning, I burned 806 calories. So 806 calories. So that's in the hour. Now, when I leave the gym, I pass a donut shop on my way home. And guys, I love donuts. They're my favorite thing in the world. It is my absolute weak spot. Okay. But my goal is to get in better shape and lose weight. I just burned 800 calories in the gym, and now I've got to pass a donut shop. Luckily for me, this part of my brain is functioning. This is the stop system. It is the part of my brain that gives me insight, judgment, and empathy. Okay. So I've got my reward system when I drive by the donut shop going, hey, you remember what it was like last time you had donuts? They were darn good. They're hot. They're going to have sugar dripping off of them. You can chase it with some milk. It's going to make you feel real good. And now that's what my reward system is doing, right? Go get that pleasure. Okay. The frontal lobe of my brain, insight, judgment, and empathy says, hang on a second, Steve. Your goal is to get in better shape and lose weight. You got up early this morning. You sweated like crazy for the last hour. You burned 800 calories. If you pull in that donut shop, each one of those donuts has 220 calories and 20 grams of fat. That's actually true for a sugar donut, guys. I hate to break it to you. Not going to be a huge problem. I'm going to have 4. That's 880 calories, 80 grams of fat. What happened to my 800 calorie workout? I should have stayed in bed. So the frontal lobe of the brain is the yin to the yang of the go system. Guys, you all make decisions. This is how your brain works throughout your day. You make decisions based on this system every day. Your reward system, you're looking at a list of options. Your reward system and frontal lobe are going to help you pick the option that gives you the most amount of pleasure, the most amount of benefit with the least amount of consequences. because you have that frontal lobe. If you get rid of the frontal lobe, if I did a lobotomy, all a lobotomy is taking a knife and basically severing all the connections between these two areas of your brain. So I go up through your sinuses and I sever all the connections between your frontal lobe and your reward system. You have no overdrive protection now, and you're driven solely by your reward system. What will you do? Damn near anything. Damn near anything. You don't have a frontal lobe of your brain that's giving you insight, judgment, empathy. What the frontal lobe does, realistically, it helps us predict the future. If I take this action, this is a result, right? That's what the frontal lobe does. What if you lose that? You're driven solely by your pleasure center. Now, I want you to pay close attention here, because it doesn't have to work out that way. The frontal lobe of your brain, the stop system, and the go system of your brain are not neurologically connected until you're 23 years old if you're a woman and 25 years old if you're a man. Every time I'm in women's jails, I teach the women, don't date any dude under 25. That's probably good advice all the way around. But the reason being is they're not fully connected from a frontal lobe standpoint. And if you want meaningful relationship, you have to have insight, judgment, and empathy. We can't be in meaningful relationship without those three things. And somebody under 25 years old, if they're a man, don't have that. Okay. Now, when they get to be 25, you can date them. All right. So this is also why your teenagers make bad decisions. I always tell my audiences, I'm going to teach you why your teenagers are stupid. They're not stupid, right? They make bad decisions. And the reason is from a brain development standpoint, until they're 23 and 25, they don't have a fully functioning frontal lobe. It's why when they get to be 16 and they're driving a car, you get so nervous. They leave the house. You're not in control. They don't realize they can hurt themselves or somebody else in a car wreck, and you do, right? They don't have that insight, judgment, empathy. But over time, they build those things in the frontal lobe of their brain. And then when they're fully connected, they can draw on them. If you don't believe what I'm talking about, if you say, Steve, that's not how it works, I want you to look at the insurance rate you pay on your kid's car insurance. And you look at it and you look at the price of it and you tell me what the price of it does when they turn 25. Okay. It's going to go, right? Because the insurance company knows this too. Right. So that's how our brains work, all of us. Okay. Now that's all well and good. What does that have to do with addiction? Stop part of our brain and the go part of our brain, those connections in between the two of them are arrested in development at time of first drug use. So let's go back to Miss Linda. Miss Linda's 32. She's injecting drugs into her arm. And I'm talking to her. I'm doing an intake on her. And I'm asking her questions about decisions she's making in her lives. And she's making these god-awful decisions, right? They're just terrible. And I'm getting madder by the second at these decisions. Can't you see this? Look what this is. That's how I react, right? And I feel my temper going up. First of all, getting mad at somebody doesn't help. And so I stopped doing that. If it doesn't help, I don't do it. I tell people, if it helped getting mad at people, I would open up a clinic. I would bring everybody in and I'd get mad at them. It doesn't work. And so I stop myself when I feel my temper doing this. I say, hang on a second, Miss Linda. How old were you when you started using? Well, Steve, I was 15. Okay, now I know what I'm dealing with. From a brain development standpoint, insight, judgment, empathy, reward system, I'm dealing with a 15-year-old. I see these folks walk in off the streets into 12-step meetings, and I love the 12 steps. Love them. Saved my life. I still go to meetings. I still have my own therapist. I still do all of that stuff. Right. But I see these kids walk in to a 12-step meeting and just get beat up right on day one. And I'm sitting there going, oh my gosh, they have no idea what's going on. They don't have access to the frontal lobe of their brain. The only thing you're doing right now is shaming them, and they're not going to come back. Right. A true open 12-step community, a true open spiritual community meets people where they're at, no matter what. Linda, can you still hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I'm going to pick my computer up and go outside my office here. You good with that?
Yes.
I want to show you all this, so guys. I'm going to take you out here and tell you what I'm talking about. So this is my office. That's where we are today. And I turn around. We have things on our walls that you can see, but these are the ones that I want you to see. Right. So when we talk about helping people with addiction, this is what we're talking about. So we want to love people unconditionally, no matter what. I don't care if you're behind bars for 20 years. I don't care if you're behind bars for life. if you want help with your addiction, we're going to try to reach out and help you. We're going to forgive you habitually. There's no conditions put on this. And the last thing we're going to do, we're going to demonstrate mercy. And mercy is giving people something they don't deserve. Okay, that's mercy. And we're going to demonstrate mercy. I told our group last night, the hardest thing I have to do in my job is hire providers that believe what I showed you all on our walls. If you can do those three things right there, you can work for us. And if you can't, I don't care how many initials you've got after your name. I don't care how many certifications you have. You can't work for us. You can't. And it's about meeting hurting people where they are. And Linda, I wanted to go out there because I didn't, I couldn't see it clear last night. I want the folks to see that. And when I talk about that, that's what I mean. Meeting those people where they are, no matter how many times it takes. And it's not about wanting it bad enough. I hear people say, oh, you can't force somebody into treatment. Oh, you absolutely can. I know many people that have responded to that. And if you don't know anybody, you know me. Because when I went to treatment, I promise you this, I damn sure didn't go by choice. I had a medical license hanging over my head. But luckily for me, the people helping me helped me to see where I was. They helped me understand that I could get better. And they gave me a life I could have never dreamed of. I've heard people say, oh, I want to get my life back. Not me. I didn't want that life. I wanted the life I got right now. And now I love this life, so I aim to keep it. So I wanted to explain to you how that worked, because I think when we understand where people's brains are, we can have more empathy. We can step into these situations and help them a little better. Now, I'm going to show you next, the second most important slide I have is that whenever we are in addiction, it takes a while for that frontal lobe to come back online, insight, judgment, and empathy. So these are PET scans of brains, okay? And don't get intimidated by PET scans. All PET scans do is look and see where radio labeled sugar goes. All the cells in our body work on sugar one way or the other. So if I could attach a radio label to a sugar molecule that an X-ray machine could see, stick it in you, light you up the X-ray machine, I can see what cells are functioning. This top row of brains are normal brains. You see the uptake throughout the frontal lobe, right? Everywhere. This second row of brains are brains that have been detoxed off of drugs for 10 days. And the drugs in this case are opioids and methamphetamine. So Linda comes in. She's using heroin in my parking lot. I bring her into our facility. I detox her for 10 days. All right, Linda, you're not going to be dope sick anymore. Have at it. And I let Linda hit the door. This is what Linda's brain looks like. What do you see in the frontal lobe as far as uptake goes? Nothing, nada. Now, what is active? Linda's reward system's active, or she'd be dead, right? But she has no access to her frontal lobe. And I'm getting ready to put her right back into an environment that's going to trigger her cravings, okay? Just like that food triggers your cravings, just like the hot donuts now sign at Krispy Kreme triggers my cravings, right? Just like that happens. And then there's a really, really good chance she's going to use. So the weird thing is that standalone detox is virtually useless in the treatment of people with opioid use disorder. Yet it's the thing the insurance companies pay the most for. And I just find that amazing. I think we need to get rid of it altogether because it is very ineffective. Now, if we look at this bottom row of brains, I told you I was in treatment for 3 months. Okay. So that's about 100 days. So this is my brain at 100 days coming out of treatment. And look what's starting to happen in my frontal lobe. All right. It's starting to come back online. So there's an old saying in 12-step meetings, 90 meetings in 90 days. Doesn't have anything to do with magic. It has everything to do with what I'm showing you right now. They just didn't understand this in 1935 because they didn't have PET scans. Okay. Your frontal lobe's starting to come back online. If you can do this for 3 months, you're going to start to think a little clearer. You just are. Now, you're not up here yet. So how long does it take to go from here to here? 2 years. 2 years in the absence of all drugs. Why do people relapse? Cravings. If I can hold cravings at bay and get people involved in a treatment program that helps them to address their underlying trauma, right? Through the understanding of ACEs and trauma therapy with use of things like EMDR, brain spotting, and coupled with a cognitive behavioral program that can give them tools to use in situations that drive their anxiety, their fear, we got a chance of them getting into full-blown abstinence-based recovery. We really do. Okay. I just have to keep their cravings at bay from here to here. And how can I do that? That's why medication is beautiful. It levels the playing field. People don't have access to what I had access to. They may get 10 days in a treatment center. They may get 12 days if they're lucky. They may get a month if they're really lucky. And that's nowhere near long enough. And none of them are going to get aftercare programs that last 5 years. None of them. So what we have to do is we have to keep people meaningfully engaged in a treatment program over the long haul, treat this as a chronic disease, using medications to quell cravings until the brain can heal itself. And some people, it won't heal itself. Some people need to be on medication the rest of their life, but their life will be getting better. They won't be going to jail. They'll have a job. They'll be back with their families. And I can tell you that needs to be our measuring stick from recoveries, because what we want to do is we want to measure success solely based on a urine drug screen. And I can tell you urine drug screens lie both ways. I got people with urine drug screens that are clear as the driven snow, and their lives are miserable because they haven't changed behavior damn one. Okay. And the people around them are still miserable, and they're still engaged in addictive behavior. They just have a clean urine drug screen. I got other folks that'll have a slip every now and then, but their lives are meaningful better. They've made significant behavioral change. They've gotten rid of the significant other who's abusing them. They're starting to take better care of themselves. They've got their family back. All right. So what I want to talk about with urine drug screens, they are not a panacea. They are a tool. I never make a decision about a patient based solely on a urine drug screen. Never. I look at the whole picture, and it's a lot harder work at the whole picture. And if you're making decisions on a urine drug screen about methamphetamine, you're going to be in a world of hurt, because that methamphetamine can be out of their system for a long time, and they can still be really, really impaired and not fit to raise a child. Right. And if you rely solely on that urine drug screen instead of looking at the whole picture of the patient, you're going to put people back. You're going to put kids back in environments that aren't safe. And so I'm telling you, we have to move away from the urine drug screen being used as the final decision maker and panacea for all things drug related. All right. All right. So we are going to finish on time. The second part of this is a lot quicker. This is the second 7 stuff I talked about. This is Dr. Vincent Felitti. He's the lead author of the ACEs study, Adverse Childhood Experiences. Most of the time when I talk to groups like this, people have experience with it, and I'm assuming you guys do. But if you don't, start off by Googling it and going from there. I think that ACEs study is the second most important study ever done in the history of medicine after hand washing. And so what Dr. Felitti did was he was a weight loss doctor out in California in the 80s, had a lot of morbidly obese patients, mainly women, but he did have some men, and they would lose weight, and then they would put the weight back on. And so he was interested in what the factors were that were different between the people who kept the weight off and the ones who put it back on. And he thought it had to do with trauma. He thought it was trauma related. So he developed a really 10 categories of questions to ask these women who had gone back and put the weight back on. And those are now our ACEs category. ACEs questionnaire is 10 questions long. But there was one question that got his attention, and it was a question around sex. And the question was, how much did you weigh the first time you had sex? And so the answers he got back were in the 40 to 50 pound range. And he determined from that, it was like, I asked the wrong question, right? What question should he have asked? How old were you, right? So these women were being sexually abused in their own families. And this really helped me understand this concept. Guys, the problem in addiction is not the drug. The drug is actually the solution. So we get this, look at this all the time going, oh, this drug is the problem. This drug is the problem. No, it's not. Those are the solutions. Just like food was a solution for these women. Why was it a solution? Because if they ate enough, they could make themselves what they thought to be physically unattractive and keep a perpetrator off of them. Right? It's a solution. Hydrocodone outside of Colonel Steve's liquor store back in 2000 or 1999 was my solution. It worked. I needed to escape the physical, the emotional, the traumatic pain that was in my life, and it worked. It was a solution. Guys, the drugs are not the problem, they're the solution. We need to change our focus. It's not about getting rid of the drug. It's about treating the underlying condition. And in this case, addressing adverse childhood experiences. There's a school here in Nashville. I'd encourage you guys to go to YouTube sometime today and search Fall Hamilton. It's FALL-Hamilton, as in Alexander, elementary school in Nashville. It's in a zip code in Nashville that is the highest incarcerated zip code in the United States. It's actually in West Nashville. And the kids that go to these schools came out of that community. That's where they come from. And their curriculum is trauma-based. All of their teachers are trauma-informed. And so when Steve Lloyd was back in grade school in Jonesboro, Tennessee, what kind of student do you think I was? How do you think I behaved? I was an absolute discipline problem from day one. My teacher, the first day of school, already knew my name, didn't know anybody else's name because he or she had already talked to my teacher last year. And so when I got in trouble, right, I've got these things going on at home where I'm being physically and sexually abused. I get to school, I act out. Back then it was corporal punishment. And we had elementary school, just had partitions. We didn't have classrooms. And so they would bring me around to the edge of the classroom where multiple kids could watch me get spanked and cry in front of me. I only cried once. After that, I'd have let them beat me to death and not shed a tear. I was no way I was going to cry, and I didn't. All right. The goal there was to scare the other kids. If you behave like Steve does, then this is what's going to happen to you. What was the problem? Problem is what's going on in my home. That's what the problem was. And I'm not upset about that, but I am telling you that there is a way to address this from a prevention standpoint, because we know what the risk factors are and we know these kids who are at risk. Let's start addressing them in elementary school, right? And we don't even have to talk about drugs. Let's talk about the behavior stuff. Let's start to look at their adverse childhood experiences. Let's have teachers that are trauma informed. Let's have access to treatment for these kids that they need to be able to deal with a parent who's incarcerated, or a lot of times multiple parents who are incarcerated. And so as I walked around the school that day with their principal, this young, brilliant guy named Matthew Portell, I cried most of the day because I saw kids that looked just like me. They're experiencing the same thing I was experiencing, only when they got in trouble and they acted out, the teachers knew where it was coming from. And it was handled much differently than shaming them and spanking them in front of multiple classrooms. We are growing, but we've got to take programs like that and we've got to spread them, because this is where we'll move the needle. Okay, this is where we'll move the needle. The problem is it'll take us a generation to show it. Politicians want things to happen on a 2 or 4 year election cycle. But I'm telling you, when we start to address adverse childhood experiences, we will move the needle. There's always going to be a new drug. There'll be something else out there, and that will always happen. We're not going to make headway until we address demand. And the demand is this. The last of the 3 sevens is just the social opportunity. I told you about mispromotion by the pharmaceutical industry around a long-acting new drug hitting the market in the early 1990s that was supposedly less addictive. It actually had it in its FDA packaged insert from our so-called federal oversight watchdogs at the Food and Drug Administration that said it had less addictive potential because it was long acting. Keep in mind, there was no medical literature to support that. And then the company goes out, Purdue Pharma, and hires legions of sales reps and pays them massive amounts of money to get doctors to prescribe the highest dosages of OxyContin that they can possibly prescribe to a genetically predisposed and trauma-scarred population starting in Southwest Virginia. And this is the study that they reference. Well, what you notice right off the bat, it's not a study. It's a letter to the editor. It was written in 1980 by Dr. Herschel Jick and his graduate student, Dr. Jane Porter. And it's not a study at all. It was in the New England Journal of Medicine. It was a letter to the editor that said, hey, we had 11,800 people in our hospital who received the narcotic preparation while they were here. And when they got out, only 2 of them became addicted. Well, that's not a double-blind, placebo-controlled study. This is purely anecdotal, and it's not even comparing apples to apples, as these are patients in the hospital over the short term, not patients who are taking pain medication over the long term. So when you see Purdue Pharma and you see the distributors losing these big lawsuits now, you're looking at the reason why this is the key piece of evidence. It's only 100 words long, but I want to give you just a snapshot of the impact of these 100 words. I haven't thrown a lot of statistics at you because statistics bore people to death. Okay, but I am going to give you this one. By the year 2024, and I think that's probably been sped up now because this was actually true in 2018. By the year 2024, we will have lost more American citizens to drug overdose than in every war that we've ever fought in combined, including the war for independence. And the Civil War, which everybody killed in the Civil War, was an American on opposite sides. That's the impact of this letter. Yet it hardly ever makes the news because they happen in isolated incidences in small towns, and the shame and the stigma associated with it, people just want to move on and want it to go away. And so this is the third 7. We have a genetically predisposed population with the right trauma history and now the third 7 falls online, where opioid pain medication become widely available and socially acceptable. After all, a doctor wrote it. And then when we finally recognize that and we take steps, we do a lot of things to curtail prescribing, but we do almost nothing to increase access to quality treatment. And people simply moved from the prescription of a doctor to the street, and eventually for economic reasons to heroin, and unfortunately not even just heroin, because fentanyl is way stronger and more potent. And now our overdose death rates are skyrocketing. I want to leave you with the last 2 slides. If you want a reason to stay up and worry at night, this is one. This looks like a Percocet, 10 milligram oxycodone. It is not. It's carfentanil. So what's happening now is fentanyl is dirt cheap. It's brought into the United States from China by the drug cartels in Canada and Mexico. Actually, they're stationed in both places with tracks in the United States. They take the fentanyl, they press it into pills that look just like a Percocet, and you take it not knowing the difference because you bought it on the street. And the difference is that Percocet, a 10 milligram Percocet, is 15 morphine equivalents. Carfentanil is 10,000 morphine equivalents. You take one pill and you die. This was bought on the street in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, by an undercover agent in 2016 or 2017. It's now really widely spread. You can see some impurities in this one, like the coloring. You'd have to have a pretty good eye to know that. But now I can't tell the difference. I can tell the difference in this one, but I can't tell the difference in the stuff I see now. It's gotten way more sophisticated. There is almost no drug on the street that has not been adulterated with fentanyl. Methamphetamine, it's adulterated with fentanyl. Why? Because the dope dealer wants the fentanyl in there, so they'll become physiologically dependent on it. And when they stop taking the methamphetamine, they'll get sick and need more. Or the person who's addicted thinks if they take methamphetamine with the heroin or fentanyl, it's a stimulant, so they won't die of an overdose. Marijuana is adulterated with fentanyl. There is nothing out there that I've found that I have not also found fentanyl in. And now I told you earlier, I showed you our most important slide. This is it was our second most important slide. This is the most important one. This is my family in front of Florence, Italy, before the pandemic. As a boy growing up in Jonesboro, Tennessee, I never imagined that I would be able to take my family there. It's in Tuscany. You can see the mountains behind it. There's the Duomo, which is really something to see. I hope I get to see it again before I die. But this is my favorite picture. This is my son, Heath. This is my now daughter-in-law, Laura. That's my wife, Karen. That's me there. I still had peach fuzz. I'm a little jealous of that peach fuzz. That's all gone now. But I want to concentrate on this side of the photo. This right here is my daughter, Haley. It's where all my money goes. And I want to concentrate on this side because dads of little girls always during the little girl's life knows at some point somebody's going to come and take her, right? One way or the other. At some point, it's going to happen. I don't get to keep her forever. I was okay with it with Heath. I love him. But and I know it's probably misogynistic and sexist and all that, but Haley was different to me. And there was a part of me that wanted to just keep her forever. I wanted her sleeping in her bed in my house, and just knew it wasn't going to happen. So I dreaded that day her entire life. I thought about it a lot when she was younger. Every day of her life, I'm not sure what happened there. Every day of her life, I went in her bedroom before I went to work. I dug down in her covers and I kissed her on her head. And I told her I loved her, and I told her how much she belonged and she mattered to me. Every day of her life that I was in that house. And then when she was a junior in high school, she's going to have her first date. And so it's to the junior prom. And so she's upstairs getting ready because she's never on time. And I'm standing out on the front porch waiting on this date to show up, who's a year older than her. He's a senior. And in all honesty, I'm going to try to scare him off. Well, that date was this thing right here. His name is Sterling. And so I sat on the front porch. Sterling pulled up in a car that didn't look like it could get out of my driveway. And my daughter's getting ready to get in it. And I talked to him for about 10 minutes. And I walked inside. My wife was in the kitchen. I said, honey, I think I just met our son-in-law. And she was like, oh, come on. Junior and senior in high school, this is their first date. Well, sure enough, I was right. And I'm glad I was right. And just a few years later, I found myself standing at the end of an aisle with my daughter in a wedding dress on my right arm, and I'm dying. I mean, I'm hating life right now. I did not want to see this, although I love Sterling. And right before I walked Haley down the aisle, she laid her head over on my shoulder and she said, Daddy, you're the first man I ever loved. I thank you for everything you ever did for me. She's crying, I'm crying. That's a good moment. That's a really good moment. The day got better in a hurry, but the kids don't know the rest of that story. And the rest of that story is, even in that moment, as soon as she said that, and what a great moment it was, I realized that I was there in person with Haley on my arm. There wasn't somebody else giving my daughter away; it was me. And the programs that we handed to our guests that night had me in it. I was not two dates. I was not Stephen Lloyd, father of the bride, May 11th, 1967, October 3rd, 2003. I was not that. I was not that because somebody met me where I was and gave me a life of recovery that I could never dreamed of. Okay. Didn't shame me and helped me find the path that was right for me, that allowed me to be there in that moment. And that's a great thing, because it would have never happened. This picture would have never happened without that. I would have been a postscript. The kids may have got to do this, but I wouldn't have been in the picture. I wouldn't have been there to give Haley away. And during the pandemic, everything had shut down in Tennessee at the end of March. And my kids were actually all in the house, Heath and Laura, Haley and Sterling, because they were building houses here in Middle Tennessee. And so they were living with Karen and I. And there was one really good thing about the pandemic, is it brought the dinner table back into play. We had dinner every night together. We had lunch every day together at the dinner table, and we talked. There was no sports on TV, so the TV wasn't going. And he's getting married in October, and he came in and he sat down at the table in April, and he said, "Hey, Pops," he said, "would you be the best man at my wedding?" The chances of that happening in 2003, 2004 didn't exist. And in 2020, they happened. And it's the miracle of recovery. This is the important picture, guys. No matter what my stigmatization around any treatment modality is, don't matter. If that's the path that gets my patient into this picture, I'm going to do it. And that's what I've done. And that's what I'm going to continue to do. I'm not telling you I don't get frustrated. I'm not telling you I don't get mad and upset. I'm not telling you I don't kick stuff every now and then. I do. But I keep this picture in mind, and I'd like to leave you guys with that. And with that, Miss Linda, I'll be done.
Thank you so much.
Can you tell us about the methadone training?
So methamphetamine, I covered a little bit of it.
All right, yeah.
Yeah, Diane, I appreciate you saying that. So I wanted to make sure I get this across to you, because it's about drug screening. Drug screening is a vital and important part of what we do. It is not everything that we do. Okay. And so when I'm interpreting a drug screen, I can look on there and see if things are plus or minuses, and I know positives, sensitivity, specificities. I know the difference between using a cup and sending something for confirmation. I get all that. When I'm making a decision about how treatment is going to go from there, I don't just use the urine drug screen. Okay. I use how is my patient doing? What do they look like? Their urine drug screen's negative, but they're still dealing. That is a problem. That is not a behavior change. And so I would encourage all of us to look at the totality, the total, the gestalt of the situation that we're looking at. Because with methamphetamine is going to be gone on a drug screen really, really quickly. And the other thing is that if you're just using a cup, you got a better chance of just guessing whether or not they're using methamphetamine. And their urine can be completely free of methamphetamine, yet the behaviors haven't changed because of the brain distortions that have been caused by the drug use. And now you're entertaining the idea of putting a child back in there based solely on a urine drug screen. And I'm telling you, we got to stop doing that. I do all the training for the DCS workers in Tennessee, and we talk about this for 3 hours. We talk about this. Okay, I'm getting ready to train their attorneys next week on this very subject. And I want you all to understand that when we're looking at recovery, I would encourage us, let's look at the total picture. Are our patients changing their behavior? Are they getting out of toxic relationships that they've been entangled in? Are they starting to build healthy community? I tell these kids, when they get out of treatment, they're headed back out into the world, hang with the winners. Find people that are winners and hang with them. Right. And here's the other thing I want to teach you about the brain real quick. I talk about community and relationship. Being in close community actually causes a release of a chemical in our brain called oxytocin. Oxytocin is part of the dopamine feel-good pathway. So it's like my time with you guys here today. I love this. I actually get a buzz from it. Okay, I do. Even through the computer. Now, if we were in the higher ed center in Southwest Virginia, it'd be much better, right? But this is community and relationship. So as we have people that need that connection, you need that feeling in their brain, there's other ways to get to it. And community and relationship is a big one. And so when I talk about that, I really mean it, not just from a standpoint of we need people in our lives that can help us see things that we can't see, but being in relationship causes a release of feel-good hormones in our brain. And we have often chased those with other things such as drugs and alcohol. So Diane, I appreciate you cueing me to that, because I want to make sure that all of our folks understand that and the reason behind it.
Dr. Lloyd, there is a question. There are some folks who are in treatment with us, and one of them wants to know if an individual were to use any kind of substance during the 2 years of healing, how far would it set them back in the healing process?
Great question, and we don't know. So some of that stuff is being looked at right now. Actually, the studies that were going to provide some of the answer to this were supposed to be presented in April at the ASAM conference. COVID threw that off, and so right now I'm assuming that it'll be next April, but we don't know that. But I can tell you can see it. I'll tell you can see it. When I'm looking at my patients that I think can come off medication, what am I looking for? Well, I need the frontal lobe to be reengaged. How can I see that? They start to gain insight, judgment, and empathy. I see a difference in their decision making. I'm going to give you the most obvious example that I've ever seen. I got a little girl probably 10 years ago. I got her. She was pregnant, scared to death. She was shooting heroin. Got her into treatment. We got her off the heroin, and she's getting a little better. But she came in to me one day and said, "Dr. Lloyd, my baby daddy," and I didn't even know what the hell a baby daddy was at the time. I do now. She said, "My baby daddy is still using. Can you help him?" And his name was Andy. And so I brought Andy in, and you know, she's still pregnant and she's doing well. And I start talking to Andy, and I get DCS involved with my patients, and I wanted them involved with this young couple because DCS had things that I didn't have access to. They had access to vouchers that I didn't have, all kinds of stuff, and it worked really well with them. And so I'd gotten DCS involved in this case, and really Andy didn't come so much for help as he did because he was pissed off at me for getting DCS involved. And I said, "Andy, tell me why you don't like DCS." He said, "They took me when I was a little boy away from my daddy." And I said, "All right, well, so tell me about that." He said, "Well, me and my little brother were riding in the back seat of a car, and Dad was in the front, and he ran off the road and hit a telephone pole. And he ran and left me and my little brother there, and DCS took us." Oh. Okay. And I didn't comment on that at all. I said, "Okay, Andy, that's not the scenario we have here." And I said, they have access to things that we don't. And I explained to him my reasoning, and he decided that he'd like to try this because he's getting ready to be a dad. And it was about a year went by. Never mentioned this again. Never talked about it. Never brought it up. And he walked in my office one day and sat down. And he said, "Dr. Lloyd, the DCS people should have taken me." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well," he said, "me and my little brother, they were single digit age. I think one of them was 6, the other one was 7. They were a year apart." He said, "And Dad just ran." He said, "They should have taken me." That's what I look for. And that one jumps up and screams, "Okay, lights are starting to come on. This is a different decision-making process." Andy loved being a dad. I haven't had him as a patient for a while, but the last count I had of him, he was doing well. The kid's 10 years old now. But that was a good outcome. And Andy probably would have never even headed down the pathway to being off all medication if I'm not listening for that. Now, I've got people that have used so long, have so much stuff that they're never going to get help for, that they'll never be able to come off. And that's got to be okay. It just does. But I never tell anybody that. So,
anybody have questions they want to ask? Or lots of nice comments in the chat box about how impactful, how they appreciate you, and a lot of stuff in the chat. So does anybody have questions?
Linda, if they don't, guys, Linda has access to all my contact info. I can hardly ever answer the phone. I can text. I'm a world-class texter. And if you have something for email, I'll return my emails. It may not always be on a good enough timetable. I get a bunch, but I do return all of them. And Linda, thanks for letting me spend the time. I enjoyed it, and it was a little different than yesterday. So never know what words God's going to put in my mouth. So that's a good thing.
Amen. We appreciate you very much, guys. I have put my contact information in the chat box. Some of you registered and some didn't. So if you would like to email me, call me, text me, if you would like to go on the ASAC email list, we would love to have you. You'll get more information about where we're meeting. We meet every other month, and we move those meetings around. We're always virtual as well. And we have an ASAC Facebook page where you'll get lots of information about things that we have going on and meetings. And like Dr. Lloyd, hopefully he will be back at the Higher Education Center soon. I would love to schedule you and Matthew Portell and Jimmy Wayne all together. I don't know if we can get Jamie here with us, but that would be great if we could schedule a conference. So that would be wonderful. Does anybody have, everybody good? Anybody before we go? All right.
Linda, I'll talk to you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Dr. Lloyd. See you all.